But let's not forget that this had been a man that had been born during a season in which the Pharaoh had decreed that all Hebrew baby boys be killed because the Israelites were becoming too great in number and in strength. So this wasn't just a man who had murdered and gone and hidden. This is a man who had been hidden from the very beginning. A man who had been hidden by his parents and then placed in a basket in the Nile River. A man who had been found by Pharaoh's daughter and then raised in Pharaoh's house. Have you ever slowed down enough to think of this? The very king that ordered Moses' death ended up paying to take care of his life. He was raised in the house of the man who decreed his death. How can we understand God's ways? How could we ever think, I got it, I get it, I understand, I know what he wants to do. He wants to be glorified. The thing is, we don't know how he will do that. Somehow this man, Moses, knew that while he was raised with the Egyptians, he belonged with the Hebrews. As an adult, he looked out and saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. It was probably a guard beating a slave. Moses' anger rose. He killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. Here's something that some of us need to work on. And anger at injustice without the wisdom of righteousness often leads to destruction. No matter how good our motives or how wrong the injustice, our anger without righteousness will lead to injustice of our own. James chapter 1 verse 20 says, the anger of man does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Moses was born to lead Israel to freedom, but it would not be by his anger, his strength, or his sense of justice. It would be by God's grace. 40 years after Moses had fled, 40 years after he let his anger take control and then had to go hide, thinking his life was probably over, God met him in the desert in a burning bush, and God didn't say, I forgive your sin. He didn't say, it's all okay. Don't worry about it. I won't hold that blood against you. God says, go back to Egypt. Go back to the scene of the crime. Go back while you're still where you're a wanted man. Go to the place you've been hiding from. You don't get to establish a new life somewhere else. You've got to go back and face what I created you for, what I called you to. Man, sometimes it would be so much easier if we could just move on. And yet God holds on when we try to move on.